51.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Future of Hospitality series. Thank you all for joining, and today we are talking to leading experts in HSE and Culinary to discuss what considerations are needed when reopening restaurants and cafes under the new COVID-19 regulations and social distancing. We've all been working very hard on our return planning, and there is a huge amount to consider from HSE through to the food offer and working practices, with an emphasis on protecting our clients and our teams when we start to go back to the office. To discuss this, our panel for today are Nick Tilley, who's the founder director for Common Sense Compliance. Nick is also an environmental health practitioner, chartered member of the Institute of Environmental Health, chartered member of the Institute of the Occupational Health and Hygiene. Also welcoming Nick Bracken, who's our HSE specialist for RA Group, and David Sims, who's the RA Group Culinary Director. I'm going to first ask the panel to talk a little bit about themselves and their industry backgrounds. Nick Bracken, or I'm going to call you Nick B for this because we've got quite a few Nicks on. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your role in RA Group.
Good afternoon. Well, initially I joined RA about 7 years ago. My background is actually in catering, mainly in kitchens. I did 20 years behind the stove, and then about 5 years ago moved into food safety and training, and then more recently the scope of that widened. I sit on the Compass advisory panel for the allergy management and technology piece. I also sit on the advisory panels for the food safety management system, and recently the COVID sort of task force for Compass, looking at building and constructing the way back for the business.
Brilliant. Thanks, Nick. David, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background before joining RA Group.
Hi, Shaun, and how everybody else. So I've been cooking for way too many years, too many to remember anyway. So I started off in the kitchens as an apprentice with the Roos, worked my way up through the Roo restaurants, finishing off for 3 years at the Gavroche. I then went out and did some time in some of the leading event caterers in London. Then actually did a stint of work with RA as Group Exec Chef for Hospitality for 7 years. Leaving to go back into the restaurant world, I did 8 years at top end Michelin star restaurants, managing director for Simon Rogan and Richard Corrigan. And then after 8 years being back from restaurants, I came back into the RA world as culinary director and been back for 2 years. So really good breadth and depth of knowledge and experience from the kind of kitchens around the world, and yeah, really enjoy being where I am.
Great, and lots of new experiences to have at this moment in time as well.
Yeah.
Nick T, what first interested you in HSE, and what's your background?
Oh, crikey, there's a question. So my background, qualified as an environmental health officer going back about 30 years ago now, and primarily I've always worked with in the food safety and health and safety aspects. I did work in enforcement for a very short period of time. I left local government in the very early 90s and joined the hotel industry with THF as a kind of a regional health and safety guy. I then moved into purchasing for a while and then bounced back out again and found myself back doing environmental health support. And broadly speaking, I've been supporting businesses like RA for about 30 years now in the food safety and health and safety field.
Great. Thank you, Nick, and thank you everyone for that. So just a reminder to everyone on the webcast to please post any questions you may have for the panel during this Q&A. So I'm going to kick off with some questions. First question is to Nick B. What key government guidance should we ensure we implement into our restaurant spaces on initial return?
I think one of the main key things that was released by government recently is they're sort of working safely during COVID-19. They've released about, so I think it's 8 different documents covering various different industries. The one that we're looking at mainly, I'm sure you probably all see this, is working in restaurants. This outlines the key main points that we need to be looking at as a restaurant business. And the 2 main focuses there are social distancing and hygiene standards, and that's for sites, businesses and personal hygiene. And then it kind of goes into a bit more detail around if you can't achieve reasonable social distancing, then what you need to do, kind of look at and consider from there. The general view is that if you can't achieve social distancing with your current practices or current sort of business setup, you need to look at changing how it works, changing the flow, changing the offer. And then that sort of follows into what impact these restrictions will have on the workplace and how you're going to manage it. One of the main things coming out of that really is how you communicate this information to your staff and crucially before they come on site, so they know what to expect, and then when they're on site to sort of reinforce and keep that training going. So those are the main sort of key points out of that, but the main key highlights for that is still very much the social distancing, still very much the hygiene standards, particularly around hand washing, and that's still been very much at the top of the list of the guidance, whether in your office or a restaurant.
Great, thanks, Nick. Nick T, same question to you. Is there anything you would add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the basics are actually very simple. I mean, it is about keeping away from people and keeping things clean and tidy, keeping your hands clean and not putting your hands to your mouth or in your eyes. Unfortunately, trying to operate within those very broad fields is, is a bit trickier than it sounds. As far as the government guidance is concerned, as Nick mentioned, there are 8 that were published, what was it, about 10 days ago. There is a key one that does talk about restaurants and cafes, but the guide was primarily designed for businesses that are on takeaways. Saying that, again, the broad principles are all the same. I had a quick look through the guide just to remind myself earlier on. I mean, there is a list of things that you need to be looking at doing, and the key one is, and this is an answer to a lot of questions that I get on a regular basis. Well, what do I do first? Well, you do a risk assessment. Well, what does that mean? You know, it's very easy for someone to say to an operator, you need to carry out a risk assessment. What are you looking at doing? You're identifying what the issues are, broadly speaking, and then you're making sure there's appropriate controls in place. And this is where you land up with a very long list when we're looking at the COVID issue. Another area that is quite important, and the HSE, being the government HSE, are pushing, is to making sure that there is a form of consultation with employees and or unions on whatever is being produced. The legislation is all umbrellaed on as the Health and Safety at Work Act, and part of that is there is a requirement for consultation. So that's an area that would need to be looked at. Social distancing within the UK, the government decided it's going to be 2 metres. There are, across the globe, there are various distances being put in place and imposed. UK is 2 metres, and therefore that is what we should be trying to achieve. It can be very difficult unless you're going to redesign a whole building or floor plan. My local co-op, the aisles are about 1.5 metres wide, so you don't stand a chance going in there, and that is going to produce challenges. And it's also about trying to make sure and encourage people to get their hands clean and tidy. And this is what the guidance is talking about, is about the provision of kind of hand sanitising stations.
Great, thanks, Nick. That's really helpful. Nick, I'm gonna stay with you. So, with your extensive experience, what do you think the EHO will be looking for when they attend our sites?
Okay, so they're going to be looking at the guide as their level of compliance. So they're going to be coming in. They're going to be asking you questions like, "Where is your risk assessment?" And that should always be their first question. So how does the business manage the risk assessment? It's normally supported by a policy. How are you managing, and what are your kind of strategic outlooks on managing the situation? What have you been doing? Have you got any vulnerable groups? That it might be clients with vulnerable groups, it might be within the staff remit. What are you doing about that? How have you managed the 2 metre rule? How is that looking? Are we putting one-way systems in? We've got markings on the floor, and how are we communicating that information? So we've got posters up. We might have tape down. We might have direct supervision, making sure that persons are appropriately spaced. It might be that we need to look at the numbers of persons that we're allowing in a particular area. So, for example, in a restaurant setup, you're going to need to look at maybe having a different type of booking system or staggering the shifts. So pre-COVID, within your operation, if the service time is say between 12 and 2, then maybe you should be looking between 11 and 2:30, depending on how many clients you've got to feed over that period of time. It might be that we're trying to limit contact by, I don't know, ordering over an internal system. So there's a menu on the system. They identify what they want. That's provided in a pre-packaged pot. Someone goes down, they go down there at the time required and pick it up, and it can all be cashless. The hand hygiene bit, we're looking at making sure there's appropriate facilities available for people to wash hands, to remind people to wash hands. And this can, again, be done by provision of signage, provision of hand wash stations. And that's all the type of thing that the EHO is going to be looking at. If they are going to take any enforcement, from what I understand at the moment, it's going to be done under the Health and Safety at Work Act. It's likely that they will, if they see that you're a competent company that knows what they're doing, and you're doing your best to try and make sure that standards are being implemented, then and there's a few minor adjustments, and this is something that they might just talk to you about to make the improvement, and you can get that done on site. If it's clear that the business is not going to make improvement, then they are able to serve improvement notices. And I have I've heard muted along from the Health and Safety Executive, which is the national body as opposed to local authority, that they may even consider serving prohibition notices will actually stop the operation. They don't feel that it's safe for individuals to be in there.
Yeah, good. It's good to know.
Yeah. I would hope that it wouldn't come to that.
No, absolutely not, and I'm confident it wouldn't, particularly in our business. So I think leading on from that is obviously how do you think we'll change the audit processes to reflect this? And I think probably for Nick T to begin with, and then on to Nick B. So Nick T. Okay,
so from what I understand, at the moment there is going to be a COVID audit bit within the Silver Standard audit. So within the business, within RA, we're operating the Silver Standard. And your operators obviously know us through carrying out the audits for the Silver Standard audit. That is not going to change. So still going to be the food safety aspect, still going to be the health and safety aspect, and the environmental and training bit. Your HSE team are looking at, this is probably where Nick B will better answer more than me, but looking at putting a layer in within the Silver Standard audit, specifically on the COVID requirements. And that will, again, it'd be all the aspects that I talked about when we discussed about the EHO requirements.
Great. Nick B, do you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, I just thought I'd briefly just mention on the previous question around sort of when Nick was pointing out around the health and safety executive possibly pursuing, stopping businesses who don't seem to have made sort of that much effort or doing much to sort of engage with social distancing and the like. It'd be worth noting that companies, as I'm sure you could imagine, has done an enormous amount of work around this, so much so that we've actually aligned ourselves very closely with Public Health England and had our current way back policy endorsed by the primary authority. So we're pretty confident that we've got all the bases covered there. But just to the audit piece, yeah, and Nick's absolutely right. We are looking at integrating a layer of sort of COVID-related topics into the standard audit system. This will probably take a slightly different form. Currently, the Silver Standard audit is pretty stable, pretty static. Food safety is food safety. Workplace safety hasn't really changed as such. There will be slight tweaks. However, the whole COVID piece is, as I'm sure we're all aware, is very much a moving feast. So it will be very, very fluid and is likely to change on a weekly basis. But it's just about keeping that up to speed with that. And like Nick was saying earlier, we're working together to try and bring something that we can layer straight on top of the standard audit. So it will end up being pretty seamless.
Great. So I know there's a lot of work gone into it from both the Compass perspective and working alongside our colleagues as well in the consultant and auditing section. So that's really helpful to know. I've got a question around the other countries that we've got feedback from. So what have we actually learned, and what lessons have we learned from people who've already reopened in other countries? I'm going to fire that one at David first of all, and then on to Nick B. So David.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. You know, I've got friends who've got restaurants in Hong Kong and China who have reached out to, you know, they've reopened again, and they've got stipulations around the 2-metre rule, maximum 50% occupancy in their restaurants. So it's limiting their turnover, you know, and likewise with the social distancing in the kitchen, they've got a kind of 40% of their team where they can, you know, have in there one space. They've got a counter per person or a stove space. So they're managing their business, and you know, in that manner, and they have to wear face masks. And again, through our businesses in Asia as well, speaking to our clients, you know, similar ways, they've worked out safe, how many people they can have in the space safely, following, you know, that country's stipulations. Obviously, the key thing is around adapting the menu to enable them to be produced by that level of staff, and it's all been pre-portioned, so buffet counters are a thing of the past in the current climate. And their single-use menus, etc. But it's about applying single directional flows in their spaces, and you know, enabling customers to get served in a manner which enables, you know, zero contact. So it's been very interesting listening to see how they've tackled those problems, or thought outside the box to, you know, engage with the customers through either technology or just clear signage. But something they've all said is, you know, communication is increased massively, which is a positive thing, because you want the customers to feel safe and secure when they come in your spaces.
Yeah, thank you, David. Nick B, anything from you on that?
Yeah, no, I don't want to go over David's ground already. I mean, that's pretty much spot on from the food side. The only thing I could probably add to that is around sort of workplace safety, not so much the food offer side of it, if you like. I think that's been well covered. More workspace, if you like. Some of the and similar to what David mentioned, there was a sort of slightly hesitant flow back into the sort of working world, then followed by a bit more of a sort of a comfortable sort of, not rush, but certainly people feel more comfortable coming back to workspace. However, we've seen in some cases where people have felt comfortable, thought, oh, we can all go to work, and then suddenly realised actually there's a lot of restrictions here. You know, there's many building operators are instructing people to be wearing sort of various bits of PPE and stuff, and you know, people come to the workplace and think, actually, do you know what, this isn't as ideal as I thought it was going to be, and I might just go back and continue working from home. I think one of the key messages we took a look from that is where businesses are wanting to you know, implement various levels of PPE, you need to be a little bit careful and sort of look at your rationale and motives behind that. There's a people piece which people often forget. Certainly, if you look at healthcare and let's say take construction, for example, where PPE is the normal, people in hospitals wear PPE all the time. Construction and manufacturing, it's all normal stuff. In catering and in office, it's not normal. This is new, and this is something you need to sort of definitely think about, certainly the impact of people and how people sort of feel about that. You know, possibly wearing face masks all day long is not actually that comfortable. So should we actually be looking at, let's change the working model, let's change the working method to, you know, allow social distancing to take place. But so it's an interesting, there's lots of sort of different sides to look at this. The global team are, as the world is beginning to creep back into the workplace, the global data coming in is starting to trickle in now. I'm sitting with a group tomorrow to look at the global piece, just to bring in that sort of newer data from the States, from Europe, from Asia, and just to sort of really tease out some more detailed information. But certainly the key takeaway for me is around people and behaviour, and what this actually has an effect on them. It's all too easy to sort of forget about. We're all concentrating on operational needs rather than, you know, it's very much about, you know, how's the everyday person going to be affected by all this new stuff that, whilst they went away before this all happened, this is all very new. They're going to be coming back to a very different world.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I've actually had a question coming from Sonia. I think I'm going to pass this to you, David, because it sort of links on from where Nick just finished. It says, how do you think we will find the right balance between opening safely and the customer still enjoying the experience of our offer?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's almost the unknown. You know, again, only from speaking to friends in the industry, it's about, you know, listening to what the customer's looking for, you know, what experience they're after, and it's the compromise. And again, I said it earlier, it's about making them feel comfortable and safe in your space. And I think people will be acceptable to the change. I mean, you know, they're all aware that it's not going to be a long-term thing, and it's for everyone's benefit. You know, certainly and it's an element of understanding, I guess. You know, the offer will need to be more refined. You know, interaction will be a massive amount less from a service perspective. So I guess it's about understanding customers' needs and communicating with them so they understand that there is going to be less interaction, and the offer is going to be reduced. But hopefully that experience will still be as excitable as it was before. I mean, look, we've all been locked up indoors for 9 weeks. You know, I can't wait to get out of the house and go somewhere when it's safe. You know, because I want that interaction. I want that freedom to go and do that and enjoy someone else's cooking. Because it's just life, isn't it? And you know, I think as long as everyone adheres to that and is open to that rationale, it should be great.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, we're all dying to get back into some sort of normality, whether it be a new norm or anywhere close to the previous norm, which we obviously doubt it will be. But yeah, we want that social interaction, and that's a big part of what we do, isn't it? It's a big part of what we deliver. Yeah. Thinking more back of house now. So how do we approach managing social distance with our teams in the sort of design and the facilities that we have? I'm going to fire that to Nick T for a bit of advice at this point.
Okay, so I think the first thing that we need to think about is the mindset of the individual. I know your question was about design. I'll come on to that in a second. At this moment in time, because people have been stuck inside, and there's obviously a lot of press about it, everybody's got it in their head, and trying to convince them to comply is going to be easy at the moment. I do think, though, that over a period of time we'll see, well, I suppose I'd call it kind of non-compliance creep, you know, because it becomes more and more of the norm, and it's about trying to keep that motivation going, and trying to get the individuals to continue to try and comply with the social distancing in this case, and that is about the messaging. It's about the types and level of communication, and making it as easy as possible. So to try and do that, say within the back of house kitchen area, you are going to be physically designating areas for individuals. You want to look at the workflow of the food, and you want to try and keep it as linear as possible, so we haven't got a lot of backwards and forwards with individuals. You might want to look at marking out a one-way system. That can be marked out on the floor or on stands. Marking out the workstations and looking at how many individuals you need to actually produce what you're trying to produce, and allowing them the space to do that. And try not to have it, again, this can be difficult, it depends on the kitchen area, but you want a nice, wide, well-ventilated area. And allowing them a good and easy opportunity to maintain good hand hygiene. And again, it goes back to what I said at the beginning of this piece, is, you know, the actual broad principles are pretty straightforward. The complications that come when we're trying to actually implement it operationally.
Yeah, I agree. It's a complicated approach to something that we've never done before, and you're right. It's going to be very easy for people to slip back into old routines. So it's going to be key that we keep on top of it and make sure that people really understand why we're doing it as well. Cool. Thank you very much, David. We've already been doing some work on this, haven't we, from a back of house and front of house perspective? What have we started doing, and how have you approached it?
Yeah, we've done literally exactly what Nick's just said. We've looked at every space, and the back house spaces are tight at the best of times, and we all know that they're normally the smallest and tightest of spaces allocated in a building. But where we've applied a very simple approach to it is, there's a one-way system in every kitchen where possible. Designated workstations with individual utensils, linear workstations again. So say the offer needs 4 cooking suites, there's an individual suite where you've adapted. We've had to change necessarily the work style that people have done due to that station positioning. So you might have had one guy doing a certain few tasks which now are impossible due to the location of equipment. So we've realigned the workflow in some places, but certainly it's tricky areas like dry stores and pot washes. It's a 1 in 1 out rule, clearly signposted and floor marking, etc. So it's difficult, and Nick's absolutely right. It's going to be this gradual slide into, as people get more comfortable, it's going to be harder to manage. But you just need to keep it strict, but also you've got to make it fun for people, right? So whilst it's so regimented, we've got to try and make it exciting still for the teams so they enjoy it. Continue training where possible, through distancing. As long as we keep engaging with the staff and they feel valued, I think it'll be a lot easier to deliver.
Yes, Nick T.
Yeah, just one other thought with that, looking at the back of house, and it's about the way that people are positioned whilst they're working as well. So it's not unusual to go into a kitchen area and find that they're working within an island set up, and they'll be actually facing each other. Well, we don't want to be breathing over each other. That's the bottom line. So it's part of the design. You need to try and design it so we're not actually looking at each other, which is not very human, is it? But that's what we need to be looking at as another issue. Yeah,
I agree. Nick B, anything to add?
No, I agree with David and Nick. The key here is engagement and education, and that starts before they come back to work, and then continues while they're at work. Stuff like this needs to be short, snappy, informative, even a bit fun. No one wants to be given a 60-page document. Oh, this is how you're going to go to work. People are going to get to page 3 and switch off. And to Nick's point, there is a possibility of sort of a creeping away from what we should and shouldn't be doing. But I think David's nailed it. It needs to be engaging. It needs to be fun. And at the end of the day, as long as we can have fun while we're at work, we should be able to sort of carry on in some sort of version of normal.
Yeah, absolutely agree. The easier we make it for them, the more fun we make it, the more they're going to adhere to it. So, and everyone will enjoy the processes. I'm just going to move on slightly. David, this is a question for you. So, how have you approached the food offer, and what will this look like on the initial return to help manage the social distancing and the COVID security measures?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Shaun. I mean, the first thing we had to think about was supply chain, and how we can ramp that back up, and whether the availability is going to be as it was before. We're certainly not going to be at the start. So certainly reduced menu offer, to reduce the number of deliveries coming into every building, also because you've got a smaller menu offer, and also to reduce the risk of things not turning up, because otherwise you're going to have that inability to react with the short turnover of produce. So limited menus, really good balance of healthy, mindful food built in there, as well as indulgent food. So people have got the choice of the both, drive health and brain activity, but also I've got an element of indulgent, which is people are going to want that mixture of, but also less content, so as in less involved dishes, so it's easy to produce, and obviously the menus run for longer, so less frequency changing. So you've got some continuity. So you've got, increased mise en place levels or prep levels for the teams to be able to cope with. However, you've also then got to be able to react to last minute changes based on delivery shortages. So it's about having some good core base ingredients, dried produce, which are great, lentils, grains, etc., which you can hold in your dry store, which you can cook and as last minute turn it over. So it's about being creative, I guess, with limited produce, but still enabling it to be creative and tasty.
Great. And how do you see this evolving over time? Do you think this will change? Do you think it will start to come back to what we saw previously, or do you think it's a change for the good?
No, I think people are creatures of habit, right? We always go back to what's our core values and what we want to enjoy in life. So I think it will come back when the time's right and when it's safe enough to do so. I think the biggest challenge is, to the industry is the impact on the supply chain, and there's going to be a massive gap. When we reopen, you think about why supermarkets have maintained purchasing of the core lines, any specialty lines, like high quality meats, where slaughter's been reduced and stopped, dry aging has then been stopped, importation is stopped, certain crops haven't been harvested, so then because the shortage of staff, so that they need to be reharvested and replanted, so there's going to be a gap, making of cheeses and certain drinks due to people going on furlough. So there will be a delayed reaction, I think, at some point when we do reopen. So it's about, again, interacting with suppliers and understanding and engaging them to understand the volumes that can come back and as when they come back. But then that means there's some positives too, right? So some land's been left to be more fertile, more nutrients have gone back into, more nitrogen have gone into, obviously because it's been left harvested. The seas have been replenished because obviously the stuff has been pulled out of the sea has been less or massively reduced. So there is a positive side to it, but it's also gauging and understanding when the impact is going to hit us fully. Yeah,
great. Thank you. Thanks very much. Right, back to a bit of HSC. Nick T, what do you see as the biggest hurdle when planning the returning to our business, and what advice would you give to teams who are just starting to think about the return?
It's about making sure that the team know exactly what the parameters are and where they're working from. I see that when these guys are going to be coming back on site, things are going to look different to them. They need to understand what the policy of the company is going to be, and making sure that they can work together on the understanding, and making sure that that is then cascaded down to the clients who are going to be coming in. As I said earlier on, I don't think there's going to be an issue with persuading them of the need to do it, which is is quite a hurdle with HSE topics normally, but everybody's been through quite a lot over the last couple of months. So I think persuasion is going to be minimal. Again, and without having to repeat myself, but it's about maintaining that level of motivation.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Similar question to Nick B. What has been the biggest challenge so far when planning the return, and what advice would you give to teams that are just starting out?
I'd say the biggest challenge to date was planning the planning. When this all kicked off, it was very simple. There's a flick of a switch. Government said everybody go home. That was all quite straightforward. Unflicking that switch is incredibly complicated. Not just for all the sort of trying to factor in all the various factors and across the various sectors, from everything from healthcare to business and industry, but also the guidance. The guidance has changed from initially what was aligned with an Ebola outbreak, which is pretty strict and severe, to where we are now. Not that it's any less tragic and horrific as it is, but the guidelines have changed numerous times along the journey. I think we've finally hit a nice balance now of sort of safe and practical, and the government's only going to sort of make that a little easier as we go along. But for the day-to-day stuff, I think one of the biggest hurdles is, again, going back to that people piece, is people getting to work. How are they going to do the normal stuff? How are they going to get there? What transport are they going to use? Are they going to walk or public transport? Just as a few tips on that. And if you can't get to work by public transport, just try and keep your distance. Wear a face covering, or make sure you can use contactless payment wherever you can. Avoid the rush hours. If you can, change the shift times. Avoid rush hours. Take a little bottle of hand gel with you. Try to face away from people if you are in a crowded situation, as Nick touched on in the kitchen sort of scenario earlier. And try and keep your time where you have to be close to people as short as possible. But I think this will come with confidence when people sort of realise, actually, it's not too bad, it's okay. And David mentioned earlier, we are a sociable people. We're a sociable species. We yearn to be with other people. So I think when the new normal is normalised and people are interacting with people, whatever the new world looks like, I'm sure we'll get over it fairly quickly and be able to crack on with our normal day-to-day stuff.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Thank you, David. That similar question to you. Would you give any advice to teams that are starting to think about the return from a culinary perspective?
Yeah, I mean, Nick's covered it all off really. It's about just being mindful and appreciating what you've got to go through, and understand and listen, and don't be silly. Think about the decisions you've got to make. Think about the public transportation, and avoid it if you can. Be prepared for change. Nobody likes change. It's it's the biggest thing in life, right? Nobody enjoys, but be open to it, and don't be afraid of asking for help and support, and feel free to ask questions. It's new to all of us, right? Every one of us is learning every day. Don't feel like you can't be open and ask questions, no matter how silly it may seem to you. It might, it's important to you, so ask it. And we're here to help. And just embrace it as well as you can, really.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, we're all learning together on this. It's all new, isn't it? So, and as you say, it's new for everybody. So, the more we can work together to get the right results, and the more advice we can get off of experts on how we get back to business safely is really important. I've had a couple of questions coming, guys. I'm gonna just fire these away. So I've got one from Karen. I'm probably going to fire it towards Nick B. We've been asked by our clients about UV light sanitation in kitchens and microbial films on bean to cut machines and work surfaces. Do you have a view on either of these?
So the UV light thing has been used in the industry for some time. UV light works by interfering with the RNA, basically the DNA structure and RNA structure of organisms, and prevents them from replicating. I've seen there are on the market various knife boxes you can get, which you store your knives in. However, you do need to make clear with these things, they do need to be clean before you put them in. You can't put a dirty knife in there, for example, and it'll come out nice and clean. They are an extra added bonus. One thing to note with this sort of the COVID sort of virus, if you like, it is actually remarkably easy to kill. When we initially thought this was actually going to be very tough, it's not. But talking about the sort of biofilm things, there's been a number of things that have come to market recently, and I think we're going to see a lot of this as this progresses. Just a quick search on Amazon will bring up a ton of weird and wonderful stuff that makes all kinds of claims for, this will keep this surface clean for days, weeks, years, months. The one bit of advice I could give to people who are seeing a lot of this coming into them is, I can provide a link later on, but there are a set number of BSNE numbers or EN numbers for UK standards around sort of sanitary solutions and a kit, which they need to conform to be effective at killing some microorganisms. So there's certainly some interesting stuff out there. Whether you want to put a film on something, really, is that going to last for months? Highly unlikely. Is it going to be effective? Is something maybe antibacterial? There's a lot of that's going around, which, the astute among you would realise very quickly that COVID's not a bacteria, it's a virus. If you've got decent and good hygiene controls in place, and that's the simple cleaning, then a lot of these are unnecessary.
Great, thank you, Nick. I've got one more question. I think Nick and David actually. I think this is the last question we've got time to take. So, would it be a good idea to have a mandatory e-learning package that would need to be completed before returning to an operation, based on the people piece, getting them on board? Is this something we're considering?
I think it's really it's a question for Nick B rather than myself.
Yeah.
I can, as far as CSC are concerned, we across the client base have put together an e-learning COVID package that at the moment we're delivering in a similar format to this. But I think probably to answer that is Nick B.
Yeah, and Nick B, do you answer that, please?
Yes, the simple answer is yes, it's coming. We are shooting there's a film shoot going on presently, which is slightly more client focused, but we're hoping to pull in a slightly re-edited version of that for our staff, basically. We have pulled together a number of one-pagers. There is a nice little sort of video. It's quite fun, it's quite upbeat, it's a really nice balance between being a bit fun and then giving the serious information across at the same time. And we are looking to put this into a e-learning package, which people can do and get all the information they need before they even come on site. So before they even get to work, they've already got a very good idea of what they're walking into.
Great, thank you. Look, thanks very much, guys, and thank you to everyone who is still sending in questions. We will take those questions and we will answer those offline. So thank you to the panel. Thank you, Nick Tilley, Nick Bracken, David Sims, for participating today and giving us some great insights and guidance on how to reopen our facilities safely. I'd also like to thank Alistair Motion, Director of Facilities for Societe Generale. I'm afraid he was unable to attend today because of some technical challenges, but I'm certainly going to still sending me the questions and get him to answer those, and we'll make sure that insights come through on documentation that we send after the webcast. So thank you very much, everyone. Our next daily webcast is our Glyndebourne special on Saturday at 11 AM, where Mr. Sims will be demonstrating how to prepare the Galvin's tartar tan recipe from their new middle and over restaurant menu. So we'll hope you all tune in for that on Saturday. Thank you very much for everyone. Thank you, guys.
Cheers.